Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Friday the 13th of December in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Emmanuel Macron is set to name a new French Prime Minister today after missing his self-imposed deadline.
European central bank policymakers are said to be planning more interest rate cuts in January and March as economic growth remains sluggish.
Plus, Klarna has stopped all hiring and cut its headcount by more than 20% using AI.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Emmanuel Macron missed his self-imposed deadline to replace Michel Barnier, whose government was ousted in a no-confidence vote after just 3 months in the job. The European Union's second largest economy is reeling from political instability without a budget agreed for 2025.
The European Central Bank cut interest rates for the third straight meeting and signalled more reductions are coming. Bloomberg has learnt that policymakers expect to cut interest rates by another quarter point in January and probably also in March. The central bank's president, Christine Lagarde, painted a gloomy picture, though, of the bloc's economy.
The latest information suggests it is losing momentum. Surveys indicate that manufacturing is still contracting and growth in services is slowing. Firms are holding back their investment spending in the face of weak demand and a highly uncertain outlook. Exports are also weak, with some European industries finding it challenging to remain competitive.
Lagarde speaking there to the press after taking the deposit rate down to 3%. The central bank chief also warned of dangers coming from global trade frictions. PIMCO and Fidelity are among investors who say the darkening economic outlook, though, may force the ECB to cut more than expected.
UK households are avoiding buying big items like furniture and electronics ahead of Christmas as they remain gloomy about the economic outlook. Research firm GfK says consumers are hesitant because of the uncharitable view on the UK's general economic situation, with their sentiment index rising 1 point in December to minus 17. The findings are a further blow to retail and hospitality companies, which are bracing for challenging trading during their most crucial period of the year.
Russia is nearing a deal with Syria's new leadership to maintain military bases in the country. Bloomberg understands that talks are taking place for Russian forces to remain at the naval port of Tartus and an airbase close to the Turkish border. The Russian Defense Ministry believes that it has an informal understanding with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, to stay at the Syrian bases, but the situation could still change amid instability. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says that America is working to ensure security in the region.
We're also going to be very focused on preventing any actor, inside or outside the country, from putting their narrow self-interests ahead of the interests of the Syrian people, especially in this delicate moment. And that includes, of course, ISIS, which no doubt will seek to regroup. And I think, as we've demonstrated, the United States is determined to prevent that from happening.
Antony Blinken speaking there from Jordan. The international community has expressed interest in maintaining the status quo in Syria, seeing the Russian bases as a deterrent to extremism in the country.
Klarna says it stopped all hiring a year ago to replace workers with artificial intelligence. The CEO has told Bloomberg that the buy now, pay later provider is using the technology to increase efficiency, resulting in a 22% decrease in headcount.
In our company by now, with the 3,500, I would say there's a core group of 200 people who have really learned how to apply it practically, to really deploy it to different purposes, for automation, improvements, generating images, generating videos, product development, cursor for engineering. Like there's an endless right now opportunities to deploy it for moving faster, accelerate the business.
Klarna's CEO Sebastian Siemiatkowski speaking there. He also said remaining employees will see a portion of the productivity gains in their paychecks, making the transition popular with the workforce. Klarna is aiming to become a bank in the United States and is open to investing $1 billion in the US market in exchange for a sped-up licensing process, according to the CEO.
The suspect charged in the murder of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was not a customer of the firm. That's according to a company spokesperson who said that neither Luigi Mangione nor his mother were members. New York Police Department Commissioner Jessica Tisch says that evidence has been gathered linking Mangione to the crime scene.
We're also able at our crime lab to match the person of interest's fingerprints with fingerprints that we found on both the water bottle and the Kind bar near the scene of the homicide in Midtown.
The NYPD's Jessica Tisch speaking there. Mangione was arrested in Pennsylvania on Monday with a manifesto inaccurately describing United Health as the fourth largest company by market value, according to Bloomberg reporting.
Those are your top stories. On the markets, we saw stocks in the US closing down. The S&P 500 finished down 0.5%. The Nasdaq slipped 0.7 from all-time highs. Treasury yields rose for a fourth day in a row. 10-year yields have risen 12 basis points this week. They're currently trading at 4.32%. On currency markets, we have seen the dollar maintaining its gains. In Asian trading today, equity markets are in the red. The Hang Seng's down by 1.5%. The CSI 300 also 1.5% lower.
Those are the markets. In a moment, we're going to bring you more on the ECB rate decision, overshadowed by the collapse of the French and German governments. We'll go live to Paris also because Emmanuel Macron is expected to announce a new prime minister this morning. But another story caught my eye this morning. This is the account of how South Korea's president declared martial law in a cabinet meeting that lasted only 5 minutes. So short there wasn't even a transcript or a memo about it. Yoon made the announcement on TV only minutes later. It's just a fascinating read. It's quite brief, so you have time to look at it this Friday morning.
Yeah, indeed. Look, it's a chronology of this massive moment in South Korean politics as well, how the cabinet ministers themselves were taken by surprise as they had been summoned to this late night meeting. And then what happened next as well, as the lawmakers rushed to the National Assembly to try and overturn the declaration too. One of the opposition leaders actually filming himself climbing over a wall to get into the National Assembly as troops had been sent there at the same time. Lots of details in it. A great read from our colleague Sam Kim on Bloomberg on the Bloomberg Terminal and on Bloomberg.com.
Now, the European Central Bank lowered interest rates for a third consecutive meeting, signalled 2 more quarter-point rate cuts to come. Inflation's near 2%, but the economy in Europe is struggling. Joining us now, Bloomberg's Lizzie Burden, who was in Frankfurt yesterday for that decision. You're back in London this morning, though, Lizzie. How dovish was yesterday's cut, really?
I mean, it was noteworthy that the ECB only went for a 25 basis point cut, given the SNB did 50. But some investors really can't shake the idea that the ECB is going to do a jumbo move at some point in the coming months because of the shaky economy. So remember as well, in the guidance yesterday, they dropped the guidance that policy is going to stay sufficiently restrictive for as long as possible, as necessary. And what's interesting is not only did Christine Lagarde refuse to rule out a 50 basis point cut, but she did admit as well that the forecasts yesterday don't include assumptions on Trump's trade policy. And Caroline, it seems a pretty safe bet that some of the countries in the euro area are in for bigger tariffs. So it seems highly probable that that will weigh on Europe, even if only indirectly. On top of that, economists are already saying that the new GDP outlook for 2025 is too rosy, given all the political chaos in France and Germany, none of which seems to be going away anytime soon, which comes back to how much stimulus ECB officials need to provide, probably more than the Bank of England and the Fed. And this is why you've got PIMCO and Fidelity warning that the ECB may have to go lower than neutral.
Yeah, which is kind of a really interesting thought given where we were only a couple of months ago and looking at rates coming down. I mean, how pressed was Christine Lagarde in the press conference on these big issues that the bank is going to be facing?
Well, as a French woman in Germany, she was going to be asked about politics, and it was kind of the elephant in the room. She didn't want to comment on the situation in French politics. She merely referred to the general political risks that make forecasting difficult. She mentioned the snap elections in Germany in 2025 February. She talked about the uncertainties around the new US government, but no specifics. What we really wanted to know was whether the ECB would be prepared to use the transmission protection instrument if there's another French yield spike like we saw to the Greece levels. She said that the use of TPI was not discussed at the ECB meeting, so kind of echoing the Bundesbank President Joachim Nagel in saying that, it's not for the fallout of political developments.
Yeah, in terms of the market reaction then to this, I mean, I think it's noteworthy, people like John Authers talking about the world, according to Trump, is here already, that basically the Eurozone's cutting interest rates in anticipation, even if Lagarde wasn't specifically talking about Trump policies.
Yeah, well, I would say she wasn't as dovish as expected. Traders, economists can read what they like into the forecasts, but after she spoke, you saw European bonds, especially Italian debt, falling. Analysts saying that her tone basically didn't match the outlook. Traders pairing ECB bets for 2025 so that they saw less than 125 basis points. And partly it comes down to the gap between ECB and Fed rates staying wide. That risks weighing on the euro, because you could have this divergence next year if the situation in the US domestically is they have the lower taxes, it's inflationary, the Fed cuts are slower, but the ECB has to cut. That currency impact could be what forces the ECB to think about Donald Trump.
Yeah, really interesting to see how the European Central Bank will continue from here as well, given that we had that repricing in markets as well after yesterday's meeting. Lizzie Burden, for now, thank you very much for joining us on the latest on the European Central Bank meeting. Of course, one of the key factors that we're watching on markets today, we're looking at the euro just below 105 against the dollar, and this question of dollar strength also very much in focus when we're thinking about where the ECB goes next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we were just talking about political uncertainty and instability in France and Germany. Well, the French President Emmanuel Macron is expected to name a new Prime Minister this morning, though he has missed his own self-imposed 48-hour deadline to appoint a successor to Michel Barnier. Joining us now from Paris is our senior editor, Phil Serafino. Good morning, Phil. What compromise might Macron come up with? Can, whoever it is, last longer than Barnier?
Well, all the reporting from the past week or so indicates that he's trying to bring the Socialist Party into a coalition of centrist parties, center left, center right, and sort of leave the far left and the far right parties out on their own. He's been trying this for months and he has not succeeded. But I think the collapse of the Barnier government has focused people's minds a little bit. So, one possible compromise might be the socialists agree to support this new prime minister and thus the effort to draft a budget. That might come along with the condition that he appoint a prime minister from the left. I guess we'll find out in the next couple of hours whether he has managed to get that agreement. That seems to be the only way to thread this needle of, this divided parliament.
Yeah, certainly when you look at the numbers, it's difficult to see alternatives to that as well. I mean, the most pressing issue, of course, for whoever takes on this job will be trying to pass a budget. How quickly could that happen?
The finance minister, the outgoing finance minister, said it will take weeks or months to get a budget done. It took Barnier, a month and a half or something like that to come up with the outlines of a budget. One thing that's interesting is the markets seem to be giving France time to get its act together. I noticed the CAC is actually up 1.6% since the Barnier government fell. The yield spread over German bonds has come down a little bit from its highs. So there's no sense of panic in markets, and investors seem to be willing to give the government time. If that changes, that would really force them to accelerate things, I think.
Can anyone also placate Marine Le Pen and the National Rally? What's the situation with them now?
Yeah, my colleagues had some great reporting yesterday. What went on behind the scenes. Barnier thought he had an agreement with Marine Le Pen to support the budget. He made several concessions that she asked for, and he walked away from a meeting with her thinking she was behind him on this. This is according to people familiar with what went on. And then she called back and asked for more concessions that he refused to make, and that's why she supported the no confidence vote. So, if Macron decides to try and pull the socialists into a centrist coalition, he will sort of, in effect, be giving up on trying to placate Marine Le Pen, and she will remain in the opposition because it seems like she's not willing to compromise to the extent that Macron is. So maybe she can't be placated.
If Emmanuel Macron manages to pull this off and get a coalition that works in Parliament, is that going to save the rest of his presidency and sort of alleviate some of those calls for him to quit?
It would certainly be a step in that direction, but it is a country and a parliament that is so divided. Getting the budget done is the basics. That's the basics of governing, and anything beyond that would still seem to be very difficult. Macron says he's not going to resign. He's going to serve out his term till 2027. He is in a much weaker position, though. There's no doubt about it.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.